So today we're going to be talking about some of the new products and capabilities that AGI is going to be coming out with over the next year for the next few months. And as Maddie mentioned, my name is Patrick North. I'm an imaging computer scientist working here at AGI as lead developer and subject matter expert for a lot of our sensor modeling and simulation. But in a previous life, this is where I lived and breathed. I was a system integrator, which meant I was responsible for pulling a whole bunch of different types of disparate technologies together that I wasn't an expert in to make a successful system at the end. And that's exactly what I'm going to try and do today when I'm talking to you about all the different capabilities that are relevant for many different domains. And there's 4 updates to the SDK family of products, an update to ODTK, and there's 4 new products that are targeted specifically at space operations and SSA applications. All these are modeling and simulation, analysis and exploitation tools, and that's what we do at AGI. We do that every day, all day long. We build software to help sophisticated engineers like yourself be successful, whether that's executing on program, winning new contracts, or just creating awesome new systems and capabilities yourself. And like any good system engineer, you need the right tools for the job. I use the analogy when my wife and I were, we bought our first home together and was a fixer-upper. And we started with a small set of hand tools from our apartment. We bought a power tool here and there. And finally, we finished the upstairs and we got to the basement. We started doing some of the heavy duty stuff. We wanted to do everything. We wanted to build a bathroom, build a kitchen, build a secret playhouse for our kids. And of course, I had never heard about an impact drill. So once I started working on the petrified hardwood, I realized I was just miserable. I didn't know what to do. And I called my brother-in-law, who's a contractor, and he laughed at me, called me a homeowner, and said, which impact drill set I should get. And the point is, if you spend all day long building your own tools or using less efficient ones, you won't have as much time at the end of the day to actually get your job done. So that's what we're trying to do today. We want to at least let you know what tools we've built and let you know that they're available to hopefully make your life easier. So I spoke to a lot of our scientists, engineers, and subject matter experts to figure out, well, okay, what have you been doing for the last year? What's new? Why is it important, and who's it for specifically? So that while I'll be presenting our thoughts, please ask your questions in the webinar chat, and we'll make sure that we get you an answer right away. And if you can, wait until the end when we're going to tell you a little about something special that we're doing this year called the Space Defense Software Expo. So let's get started. So the 4 space operations and SSA applications we're going to be talking about are SEG, MPT, SOTA, and Voyager. SEG, that's our space event generator, and it's on the modeling and simulation side of SSA. It's especially useful for training. So it has a very simple interface. You can create 12 different types of space events. You can mix and match them, combine them different ways, and put together a scenario to create your test data. It can be used in training events as seed data for an exercise, as well as evaluating what-if scenarios. I want to ask a few questions for each of these. So I talked to Dr. Matt Barry, and he said, well, what are some of the questions you might get? And the first was, does this generate data that's actually good enough, it's high enough fidelity to be used in operational systems? And the answer is yes. SEG uses a high precision orbit propagation, HPOP, with orbital regime specific force models that are configurable by you, the user. The other question was, where has this been used before? And this is something that you should be asking about every single tool. You want to know, has this been used operationally? The whole impetus of SEG was that this product was used in AGI support to Stratcom's SSA exercise Global Sentinel. There was a lot of experience using the SEG technology and algorithms in those exercises, and also this has already been sold to the U.S. Air Force and Japanese defense contractors supporting their Ministry of Defense. So it's in use operationally. And I said, well, so who's this for? What's the perfect use case? And what I was told is, if you're a training officer at a satellite operations center and you need to train up your crew on specific spacecraft events, for example, if there's a re-entry that's anywhere near China, you could use SEG to generate the ephemeris and observations for that specific event at any given time that you wanted to simulate. And you can add multiple variations to increase or decrease the complexity of the training exercise. Do you want this to be a cakewalk, or do you want to be a worst case scenario? Next, we have MPT. MPT is a maneuver processing tool. This is on the analysis and exploitation side of SSA. This is based on processing observations to produce ephemeris, so you can quickly characterize potential threats that might allow orbit analysts or ops floor operators to respond appropriately, maintain custody of a spacecraft. So what does this let you do, basically? Well, 1, it lets you detect if something funny is happening, and 2, it lets you predict what's going to happen next. Is this something that's normal or completely out of the ordinary? So when I asked a few, what are some of the good questions, Dr. Jim Woodburn got back to me, and he said, well, first off, can this be seeded with likely hypotheses? Is this something that you might see commonly for a particular spacecraft? And the answer is yes. You can provide what you think are the most likely scenarios for a particular spacecraft, and then what MPT will do is it'll evaluate those first, and then it will continue on trying to solve for other potential possibilities. So who's going to be using this? Well, if I'm a wash floor operator, for example, and I'm interested in keeping an eye on the neighborhood around my asset, I could be using MPT to quickly identify if there's any threatening maneuvers of the satellites around me, and then I could immediately give my commander actionable intelligence in real time while those events are still happening. Next, we have SOTA. By the way, we're going to be going through a lot of these, so hold your breath. We'll get through it quickly. SOTA is the Space Object Threat Assessment Tool, and that's now. I'm from Pennsylvania, so some people say SOTA, some people might say POP. I don't know which you are, but you can let us know in the comments. But this is also on that operational analysis and exploitation side of SSA. So this lets you look at the entire catalog and try and find what are the greatest potential threats. And the key here is that it runs fast, extremely fast. That's the big differentiator here. SOTA allows you to characterize space object threats that have the potential to maneuver into dangerous situations with your spacecraft. So some of the questions we had, well, can it do all-on-all analysis? And just like any good engineering problem, it's complicated. But you have the options to do one versus one versus many, and many versus many simulations, or pieces of analysis. Now, can it do out-of-plane intercepts or rendezvous? And the answer to that is yes also. But then I said, well, what's the difference between a rendezvous and an intercept? And they told me it's just if they break at the end or not. So use case. Who's going to be actually taking a look at this problem? If I'm going to go back a slide. So if I'm regularly monitoring satellites, one or more satellites on orbit, and I want to know if anything in the entire catalog of space objects could potentially become a threat to me, SOTA would let me take a look at all the other space objects in a matter of minutes to see which would have the highest capability of becoming a threat at that point. Next, we've got Voyager. Voyager is a tool, this is specifically for RPO, rendezvous and proximity operations. It's used during the mission design and planning phases. So if you want to visualize the steps that need to be taken in order to make this rendezvous or proximity operation successful, it has SDK's Astrogator operating as the physics engine behind all of this. One of the great things about Voyager, it's easy to use. You have simple drag and drop interfaces, an intuitive mission timeline at the bottom to make these RPO mission planning simple. Some of the questions: does this support access constraints? So, for example, if you said, I'm only going to try and make this maneuver, I'm only going to do this prox ops if I have certain things in place. And yes, you can say, you want to put a constraint on the AF-SCN tracking station access, or you want to only do this if you have optical tracking station access, or if you had a notional space-based sensor, like a Walker constellation access. You can even add things like, for example, if you're worried about sunlighting or keep out constraints, you can add those in as well. And does it work in GEO? Yes. Voyager is actually specifically targeted to work on GEO objects. The user for this is if you're a mission planner and you want to get everything set up ahead of time. If you want to generate a rendezvous scenario with a GEO satellite, Voyager would let you plan that out piece by piece. You could view everything on a timeline and come up with a solution easier and faster than ever. Next, we have ODTK. Now, for all those Penguin lovers out there, ODTK is now on Linux. That's official. The release of ODTK engine on Linux brings an operationally verified power of ODTK to the new segment of Linux platforms that it wasn't available on before. And the reason that's important, there's a few reasons. We have a number of ODTK power users that have access to these really powerful Linux servers and clusters. So this opens the door to using ODTK and automate large numbers of computations on these Linux platforms. It's also important if you're worried about using Windows for whatever reason, if it's cost, if it's security, if it's reliability. Also, if you have an operational or programmatic requirement that specifically says thou shalt use Linux, you can now use Linux. Now, of course, we're going to get into the best part of this, the SDK stuff. I'm an SDK developer, so this is what I love. And the 4 new SDK capabilities that we're going to be talking about, specifically, we have Astrogator's low thrust enhancements, radar multifunction, glTF modeling, and SDK Enterprise. So first, we're going to get into SDK Astrogator. This is their low thrust stuff. So Astrogator's low thrust modeling and optimization is all about trying to do more with less, of course. Whether you're a small satellite trying to do more ambitious operations, or you're a GEO program trying to be most efficient with your resources and stay on budget, one of the keys is finding finding the right way to get your satellite in the right place at the right time so you end up with the orbit that you want. And with the low thrust modeling and optimization, you can design the best plan or suite of options to get you there. So some questions that we had, what type of optimization is there? And the optimization is co-location. And what standard optimization methods you include, and of course what Jim Woodburn told me was everybody wants to hear these. The SNOpt and IPOpt are your optimization methods to get there. So, for example, if I'm a trajectory designer and I'm interested in getting to GEO, I want to figure out what the most efficient geotransfer trajectories for satellites equipped with low-thrust engines are. And the new astrogator low-thrust modeling, that optimization capability will let you compute not just what orbits are possible and design the mission to achieve them, but also you can trade those options as well. You can simulate them early in the design and development phases too, so that you can get a plan in place early on, figure out the right budget to do that, and then optimize the resources for the rest of your program to make sure that you're successful in the end. Then we have SDK radars. This is the multifunction radar. And what I say is, everybody's being asked to multitask today, even our radars. SDK's new multifunction radar, it lets you program your radar to perform multiple tasks at the same time. So you can adjust to different target search and detection modes, different tracking algorithms or thresholds, and you can also model jamming and reactions to jamming. So the question a lot of people, said they're going to ask is, can you specify your own search algorithms or metrics? And the answer, yes. Users are going to have the option of using the built-in CFAR algorithm. You can also use cell averaging, ordered statistics, or if you have your own external algorithm that you like to use, you can use that as a plugin. So, for example, if you're flying an aircraft that's going to be potentially tasked with multiple search and tracking missions, and you also may have to deal with a jamming environment, as well as you're going to need to be able to use that multifunction radar to be able to model all these competing concurrent tasks. Also, you're going to need to be able to model the effects of a contested airspace with something like this as well. Next, we've got glTF. If you haven't heard of what glTF is before, then your kids probably have. This is the computer graphics industry. They're quickly moving to modeling all of their high-quality computer graphics with glTF. This is a new standard from Windows to Facebook and also even Minecraft. So in SDK, we're adding the capability to do glTF modeling also. And you can load, so what does that mean? Well, you can import some of the best 3D graphics models that are available today. If you're building a modern day aircraft or spaceship, you want it to actually look like it. And with glTF, you can add that extra level of professionalism and visual detail to your SDK scenarios and analysis to show your stakeholders and decision makers what you're actually talking about. Some of the questions, can you use these models in other places? And yes, the idea is this is a new standard that's coming out. So you can use these from SDK to your other visualization tools like Unity, or if you have your own proprietary tools that support this format as well. Does SDK support model animations? We actually currently load a static model, and if you've used SDK before, we support a standard set of articulations like we do with all of our other existing model formats in SDK. So for this, the use case that I like to use is if you're a user and you're going to be putting together a multi-million-dollar proposal, or if you've got a presentation that's going in front of high-level decision makers and you want everything to be absolutely perfect, one of the best ways to create your credible professional visuals right now is to use these high-quality glTF models. Those are the best graphics you can use to back up all the hard work that you're already doing on your analysis. Next, we have SDK Enterprise. So finally, SDK Enterprise lets you go from, this is if you're moving from an individual workstation to like a professional working group. So you can have a smooth and efficient collaborative engineering and development environment. You want all your parts and your team working together. And the 4 pieces of this are going to be, of this enterprise package are, you've got the SDK data federate. That lets you share your scenarios and analysis between different users and groups. So if you're working on the same portion of a program, or you've got specialized groups that are working in different areas of the program, you can actually share scenarios and results and analysis together easily. The geospatial content server, that lets you have a common set of terrain and background imagery. So it's not just for visualization, but also if you're using that for analysis purposes as well. The scalability platform, if you've got massive amounts of data, or if you're running gigantic Monte Carlo simulations or parametric studies, this is going to let you do that. It's going to let you utilize all the hardware available to do that processing. And last, SDK as a service, that's something that's going to let you virtually host SDK over the cloud as a web service. Some of the questions we had on this was, does this allow configuration management? And absolutely. if you've got a complicated program where you're dealing with different versions of analysis, different potential what ifs, this will let you version control all of that so you have your configuration management under control. Does all of this data get stored locally on your machine? No, of course not. That's the whole point, right? If you're using these shared resources and you don't want redundancy, or if you have gigantic servers that you want to store this data on, this is going to let you offload a lot of that to those. So if you're a program manager and you've got a really complex system where your teams of engineers are going to each be doing their own analysis and it all needs to come back together at the end, then that's what SDK Enterprise will enable your whole program and your team to do. They can work together better, faster, and more efficiently.
Thanks, Pat. And now we're going to go to the Q&A section of the webinar. And Adam, do you have any questions that you've seen come up?
Yeah, there was one question. What was the difference between SOTA and NPT, just to characterize that a little bit more? So just to clarify, SOTA is allowing you to take in a group of TOEs or .e file or different position data, one or groups of data, and then to identify the threat, which is largely going to be based off your delta V. But it's going to rank order all those different spacecraft objects in terms of their potential threat. NPT, on the other hand, is going to take the data that you have, the raw data, and characterize, are there maneuvers happening and what kind of maneuvers are they? So hopefully that answers that a little bit more.
Great, thanks. We have another question. Which catalog of space objects does SOTA use and how often is that updated?
So SOTA, again, allows the user to input a variety of different formats of object data, and so it's coming from the users. It's not held by the software, and so you can update that as often as you'd like. And that is the expectation, is that this would be something on a watch for in our operations center that you'd be regularly running this analysis to see at this time is there an impending threat and who that threat is.
Great, thanks. And we have a few more questions. They're just coming in here.
Do you want to go there and answer? Maggie, you got it.
Great.
Do you want to read the question?
All right. So the question is, how about some low thrust example scenarios? LEO to GEO, Earth to DRO Moon, Earth to Mars, etc. So this is all about the astrogator low thrust stuff. So as we release the features into the product, we'll be supporting that with tutorials and example scenarios. So those won't be part of the install necessarily, but we'll be able to make those available to people who need them.
Awesome, thanks. And when are these products going to be available?
So they all have different dates, release dates. Some of them are becoming available as of this week, and most of them will be becoming available over the next month.
All of them will be available to see at the expo. I know we're going to at least have demo or beta capabilities of everything right there, so you can start get a feel for okay, what does this actually do? What would it look like with some of my data or some of my day-to-day operations?
Awesome, thanks. And another question is, are there any new EOIR capabilities?
So we have. They're all quality of life improvements. So everything, I've been working really hard to make things faster here and there. So for example, I've sped up the course rendering algorithm. I've sped up just some of the interoperability, user interface timing, and you also have a faster mod train based atmospheric model now. So you can actually use some smarter processing and hopefully get your job done faster.
Great, thanks, Pat. And last but not least, one more question.
So there's a question regarding the SDK roadmap. So what I can say is that we do have a roadmap that we're working off of that our primary focus, as Pat mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, is to really try to address as much as possible the ability of our users to collaborate and to work in an enterprise environment. So there's a lot of focus in the products that we're developing towards that end. But additionally, there are specific feature driven roadmap items such as the multifunction radar, which is really just the first step in our journey towards implementing more behavior modeling type functionality within the SDK architecture. There are additional features that we'll be addressing. There'll be a lot more work done in the low thrust arena, but if you actually want to talk to myself or any of the subject matter experts in detail about this, I will be at the expo stops. So will a few of the developers. So we'll be happy to listen to any of your suggestions, the things that you think will impact your ability to do your job in the most effective ways. We're always listening to suggestions from our customers, so feel free to approach any of us and provide some input.
Thanks, Wash. This question is also for you. What are the main new features for SDK 11.5? You can summarize those.
Okay, so quickly, the primary things were the SDK, the multifunction radar capability, the low thrust additions to Astrogator, the addition of the glTF modeling, and the additional enterprise features. So being able to store your analysis on a shared resource, to scale your analysis using the scalability platforms, to have access to high fidelity terrain and imagery data across your enterprise, and the additional ability to basically run SDK in a web browser. So those are the primary SDK functions. And then you also heard about some of our new products, standalone products, SOTA, SEG, MPT, and then the new version of ODTK that's available on Linux.
Awesome. Thank you, Wash. Appreciate it. That is all the time that we have for questions. Again, if you have any more, please come to the Space and Defense Software Expo, and we will also try to answer all of the questions that we didn't get to offline and respond to you guys individually. Thanks again for joining, and we will look forward to seeing you at the Space and Defense Software Expo. See you next time.